Turning compost has been treated as a golden rule for decades. Many gardeners believe the more often you turn a pile, the faster it will break down. In reality, excessive turning is one of the most common reasons compost stalls, dries out, or never reaches its full biological potential. Compost is not just decaying material. It is a living system, and living systems do not respond well to constant disruption. When turning becomes obsessive rather than strategic, decomposition slows instead of accelerates. Understanding why this happens can completely change how your compost behaves. Constant turning destroys the microbial architecture that does the real work. Compost decomposition is driven by microbial colonies that organize themselves in layers. Bacteria dominate the hotter, wetter core, while fungi extend networks through cooler outer zones. Every time the pile is turned, those networks are torn apart. Fungal hyphae, which can take days or weeks to establish, are especially vulnerable. When they are repeatedly broken, they must start over from scratch. This results in compost that smells active but never develops long-term stability. Instead of maturing, it remains stuck in a perpetual restart phase where microbes burn energy rebuilding rather than breaking material down. Frequent turning causes moisture loss that, silently stalls decay. Microbial activity depends on moisture more than oxygen, actually. Turning exposes the interior of the pile to air, wind and sun, allowing moisture to escape rapidly. A compost pile can look fine on the surface while the interior dries enough to slow microbial metabolism. When that happens, dry microbes go dormant. Gardeners often respond by turning again, thinking the pile lacks air when the real problem is, in fact, dehydration. Compost that is turned too often requires constant re-watering, and even then, moisture rarely redistributes evenly before the next disturbance. A slightly compact, undisturbed pile holds moisture far more consistently than one fluffed every few days. Over-aeration cools the pile and, collapses heat-driven breakdown. Heat is not just a byproduct of composting. It is a tool that accelerates the breakdown of tough materials like stems, leaves, and woody fibers. Heat builds when microbes consume carbon and nitrogen in a stable environment. Turning releases that stored heat instantly. If turning is done too often, the pile never stays hot long enough to push decomposition forward. This is why, some compost piles heat up repeatedly but never finish. They spike briefly, cool down, and reset before reaching the sustained temperatures needed to complete the process. Older composting methods focused on insulation and structure, not constant movement, for this exact reason. Excessive turning burns nitrogen faster than microbes can use it. Nitrogen is the fuel that drives rapid decomposition, but it is also volatile. When compost is turned frequently, nitrogen escapes as ammonia gas, especially in warm conditions. This loss is invisible but devastating. So microbes actually need nitrogen to multiply and, digest those carbon-rich materials. When nitrogen escapes, microbial populations shrink and, decomposition just slows down. Gardeners might then add more green material, but honestly, that can create an imbalance and even cause odor issues without really solving the root problem. A stable pile, on the other hand, conserves nitrogen by allowing microbes to bind it into their biomass, instead of just letting it escape into the air. Turning your compost too often, actually, prevents fungal dominance in finishing compost. The early compost stages are mainly bacterial, but finished compost, it relies quite heavily on fungi. Fungi are the ones responsible for breaking down lignin, those complex plant fibers, and other resistant materials that bacteria just can't handle. They really do prefer stable, low-disturbance environments. When compost is turned frequently, fungi never really gain dominance. The pile, well, it remains stuck in a bacterial phase that breaks down the softer material but, leaves the tougher components intact. This, in the end, results in compost that might look finished but actually lacks structure, fungal diversity, and those long-term soil benefits. Compost like this honestly feeds plants briefly but does not build lasting soil health. Turning is not inherently bad. It only becomes harmful when it is done without purpose. Turning is in fact useful when correcting severe compaction, redistributing moisture after a heavy rain, or blending new material into a cold pile. And it's also quite useful early in the process when large, uneven inputs need mixing. Beyond that, turning should become infrequent and strategic. Many highly effective compost systems turn once or twice total or not at all. These piles rely on layered inputs, proper moisture and insulation rather than mechanical disturbance. When compost is left undisturbed for longer periods, microbial communities stabilize. Moisture remains consistent. Heat builds and stays. Fungi establish networks that bind the pile together. Earthworms and beneficial insects move in naturally. The compost transitions from active breakdown to humus formation instead of hovering in limbo. Gardeners often report that compost actually finishes faster after they stop turning it so often, even though, it feels a bit counterintuitive. Instead of turning frequently, try focusing on structure right from the beginning. Use varied particle sizes, so air pockets form naturally. And, be sure to maintain moisture at about the level of a wrung-out sponge. Finally, insulate the pile with straw, leaves, or even some finished compost. Let heat and biology do the work. Turn only when something clearly needs correction, not on a schedule. Compost thrives on stability, not micromanagement. Composting is less about effort and more about restraint. The microbes doing the work evolved to function in undisturbed environments like forest floors and manure heaps, not constantly flipped piles. When gardeners stop fighting that reality, compost stops stalling and, starts finishing. If this changed how you think about compost turning, subscribe to Gentle Herb Gardening for more soil truths that challenge modern habits, and share this with someone who's wearing themselves out flipping a pile that never seems to finish.